My name is Catherine Miller, and today was meant to be the peak of my academic journey, graduation day. I had been counting down to this moment for months, investing long hours, effort, and persistence into my studies to earn it. Every late night and every exam reinforced my sense of pride, especially because I believed my family would be there to witness and celebrate this achievement. At least, that was my expectation. As I put on my graduation gown, excitement washed over me. I had checked everything twice: my cap, my regalia, and the speech I had carefully prepared to mark this milestone. 8 years of work had led to this day, and I felt ready to present the results of that commitment. However, when I looked at my phone, a familiar sense of unease returned. I had sent repeated reminders, yet all I received in response was silence, or vague messages about other plans and distractions that threatened to overshadow my graduation. Adding to that, my younger brother Ryan was hosting a backyard barbecue for his friends that same day, complete with music, food, and laughter, the kind of gathering I had always imagined would surround my own achievement. The idea that my family might choose his party over my graduation created a deep sense of disappointment. I needed their support and wanted them present. I tried to steady myself, reminding myself that I had earned this moment and deserved to experience it fully. As the ceremony approached, anxiety grew beneath my excitement. I entered the auditorium alongside other graduates who were openly sharing stories about families who had traveled great distances to support them. I smiled politely, but my thoughts were fixed on the empty seats I was beginning to anticipate. Once seated, my heart raced as I scanned the crowd for my parents, convinced that if they arrived, everything would feel complete. Time moved slowly, and with every passing second, the absence became harder to ignore. When Dr. Johnson, the dean, stepped onto the stage and welcomed the graduates, I joined the applause, though my chest felt tight. Celebrating without my family felt hollow. As names were called, emotions intensified. When my turn came, I walked onto the stage determined to make the most of the moment despite everything. But as I looked out, my resolve faltered. Toward the back, I noticed my brother's friends gathered together, drinking, laughing, and clearly enjoying the barbecue atmosphere. The realization struck hard. My family, particularly my mother, had chosen that gathering over my graduation. I completed the walk and accepted the applause, but the sound felt distant. A quick check of my phone confirmed it. No messages, no calls, no acknowledgement. The sense of neglect was undeniable. After the ceremony, I walked to the parking lot feeling empty and disconnected. This day was meant to mark a new beginning, yet it underscored a painful truth. I was often sidelined in my own family. Sitting in my car, staring out at the busy streets of Boston, I felt suspended in uncertainty. I should have felt accomplished, but instead I felt invisible. Memories of years spent studying and sacrificing replayed in my mind, and it became clear that my family's indifference could no longer define my value. I realized I needed distance, not out of spite, but for survival. I scrolled through my contacts and stopped at Emma Torres. Throughout university, she had consistently supported and believed in me. I sent her a brief message explaining that I needed to leave and start over. With that decision made, I committed to heading west, away from Boston and the weight of unmet expectations. For the first time in a long while, hope felt possible. The drive toward San Francisco felt unreal. Each mile represented not only physical distance, but emotional separation from my past. When the city came into view, it felt full of opportunity and possibility. Upon arrival, the character of San Francisco, the hills, the Victorian houses, the Golden Gate Bridge, felt welcoming. Settling into my small, sunlit apartment, I took in the reality that I was no longer defined by my family's neglect. I focused immediately on job applications, drawing on my technical background and renewed confidence. It didn't take long to secure an interview with a startup, and during that conversation, I felt heard and respected. Days passed quickly as I adjusted to the city. Soon after, I met Emma for coffee. What had been an online connection became real support in person. Over coffee, I shared my fears and goals, and she listened with genuine understanding. Not long after, I received the news. I got the job. The company was preparing to launch a new tech product designed to simplify life for people living in cities, and I could hardly believe how fortunate I was. That moment marked a clear turning point, representing my commitment to independence and personal growth. When I left my new workplace later that day, I took in the busy city around me and felt a sense of ownership over this new chapter. I was energized, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. My past felt more distant, and for the first time in a long while, my emotions felt lighter. I had made deliberate choices, closing the door on a painful history, and as I adjusted to this new life, I finally understood that I was in control of my own story. I felt free, aware that the future was open and waiting for my decisions. As I began settling into life in San Francisco, unexpected emotions resurfaced. My role at the startup was exciting, and I was deeply engaged in the fast-paced tech environment. Still, beneath my professional progress, a quiet tension remained. About a week into the job, I arrived early to prepare for a team meeting, eager to share my ideas about the upcoming product launch. While making coffee, I overheard coworkers in the break room laughing and sharing stories about their families, stories that once felt familiar to me. The realization came sharply. Even though I had intentionally distanced myself from my family, moments like these showed that the past still followed me. Memories of my graduation and the emptiness caused by their absence resurfaced. I had tried to leave it all behind, yet the unresolved pain lingered. Later, during the meeting, I noticed how my workplace was beginning to feel like a new kind of family. Still, vulnerability remained. Hearing my boss Tony and my coworker David casually talk about family gatherings reopened old wounds. I contributed to discussions on user experience and design, but a persistent thought remained: did my family even know about my progress or care? It was frustrating to realize that despite moving forward, their absence still affected me. After a demanding day, walking home through the lively streets, my thoughts turned to Emma. She had consistently been my source of encouragement. I called her, looking for perspective. When she asked how things were going, I admitted that although work was going well, memories of my family still surfaced unexpectedly. She reassured me that this was normal, explaining that starting over does not erase the past, but teaches you how to grow beyond it. Her words resonated. I understood that avoiding those feelings wasn't progress. Acknowledging them was necessary. When the call ended, I felt a sense of release. My experiences had shaped me, giving me resilience and insight. I didn't need to erase my past, only accept it. The next morning, I approached the day with renewed resolve, prepared to face both opportunity and unresolved emotions. I was ready to move forward without letting anything hold me back. Over the next few weeks, life in San Francisco became more stable. I developed a consistent routine at work, strengthened my friendship with Emma, and continued working toward my goals. Still, a quiet feeling persisted, suggesting that I was avoiding an important issue: my unresolved relationship with my family. Then news arrived that forced me to confront it directly. My grandmother, the one family member who had always truly seen me, had passed away. The funeral would be held in Boston. Despite my efforts to move on, the weight of that loss drew me back. As the date approached, I felt overwhelmed by conflicting emotions: grief for my grandmother and anxiety about facing the family I had tried to leave behind. Part of me wanted to attend and grieve openly, while another part feared reopening old wounds. On the day of the funeral, standing in front of the mirror in my San Francisco apartment, I adjusted my black dress and reminded myself that this was not just another gathering. It was my return to a place where I once felt invisible, and the thought unsettled me. Arriving in Boston stirred familiar emotions. The family home looked unchanged, while I felt entirely different. Stepping inside, the atmosphere felt heavy with memory and tension. The service itself was quiet and respectful. I noticed my mother, Linda, speaking with relatives, and a wave of anxiety followed. She stood there as the person who had repeatedly failed to show up when it mattered. Afterward, during a small gathering at the house, I sensed eyes on me, evaluating. Ryan was there too, but I kept my distance, staying on the edge of conversations. When my mother finally noticed me, her expression shifted, and she approached with visible tension. She said my name, acknowledging my presence, and the weight between us was unmistakable. Without planning to, I asked the question that had been building for months: why she hadn't come to my graduation. I asked whether Ryan's barbecue had truly mattered more. The room fell silent, attention turning toward us. I spoke clearly, explaining how important that day had been to me and how abandoned I felt. I asked if she had ever considered what it was like to always be overlooked. Her reaction showed confusion and defensiveness, but I stood firm. I told her this wasn't about excuses and that dismissing my feelings was no longer acceptable. I needed her then, and I still did. That day was meant to be mine, and it was ignored. Years of frustration surfaced in that moment, forcing me to face the reality that even after building my independence, my family still influenced how I felt. I decided then that their choices would no longer control my emotions. The room stayed quiet as everyone shifted uncomfortably, and I noticed Ryan watching with concern. This moment went beyond a single event. It represented years of emotions I had kept inside. I left for San Francisco because I could no longer live in someone else's shadow. Yet part of me remained hurt because I had wanted my family to acknowledge and support that step. I held back tears, not seeking sympathy, but understanding. Over time, it became clear that holding on to the hope that things would change was only causing more pain. The pattern was consistent, and it hurt deeply to accept that reality. My mother tried to respond, but struggled, eventually saying she never intended to hurt me and believed I was fine on my own, assuming graduation was just another day. That explanation made it clear how differently we viewed my efforts. For me, graduation represented years of discipline and sacrifice, and realizing it carried little weight for her was sobering. In that moment, I understood that reconciliation or acknowledgement was unlikely. I stopped arguing and chose to step away. I made it clear that I was done seeking attention and was moving forward regardless. As I left, I felt both sadness and relief, aware that I was reclaiming control over my story. Stepping outside, I felt lighter, ready to focus on a future where I would be valued for who I was. Earlier that same graduation day had begun with cautious optimism. I prepared carefully, checked my phone repeatedly, and reassured myself that my family was simply busy getting ready. Outside the venue, families gathered with signs and flowers while I waited, refreshing my messages. I avoided sending another text, telling myself they were delayed. As the ceremony began and seats remained empty, denial faded. When my phone finally buzzed, it wasn't reassurance. It was a photo from social media showing my family celebrating at a backyard party, timestamped to the moment I was walking across the stage. The applause felt distant as I accepted my diploma, which suddenly felt less like recognition and more like proof of effort no one else had acknowledged. After the ceremony, surrounded by families celebrating together, I stood alone. Calls to my mother went unanswered, and when one finally connected, I realized she was still at the party. In that moment, clarity replaced anger. Staying meant continuing to accept being overlooked. Leaving meant choosing honesty over expectation. That evening, I made deliberate plans. I reviewed years of messages that centered on my brother's milestones while mine were treated as secondary. Leaving had to mean more than distancing myself. It required redefining who I was without their expectations. I listed practical steps: ending the lease, transferring savings, applying for distant jobs, and cutting unnecessary ties. One name stood out: Emma Torres, the person who had consistently supported me. When I told her I was serious about starting over, she responded immediately, offering both reassurance and a place to stay. I packed what I could, returned my keys, and sent one final message to my mother: a photo of me alone in my cap and gown inside the empty auditorium. There was no caption. The silence that followed confirmed my decision. I muted her number, placed the phone face down on the passenger seat, and turned the key in the ignition. Was I running away or finally stepping out of a role I was never meant to play? The miles passed in a blur as I drove west, my old life shrinking in the rearview mirror. Every state line felt like another invisible cord snapping, another tie to my mother loosening. By the time I reached San Francisco, exhaustion clung to me, but beneath it was relief. Emma met me outside her apartment, barefoot in mismatched socks, arms open. "You actually did it," she said, pulling me into a hug that lasted a beat longer than casual. "You really left. What was I supposed to do?" I replied. "Wait around for her to remember I exist?" She didn't argue or defend my mother. She simply helped me carry my boxes up the narrow stairs and cleared a space in her living room for my things. The first week was a haze of logistics. I applied to every tech company willing to take a chance on a recent graduate and spent evenings rewriting my life on paper. Emergency contact, Emma Torres. Next of kin, none. Permanent address, San Francisco, California. Every form that once bore my mother's name became a small ritual of erasure. Crossing out Linda Miller was quiet satisfaction. If she wasn't going to be there when I needed her, she wouldn't be the one contacted if something happened to me. 3 weeks of interviews, rejections, and waiting passed. Eventually, I received an offer from a mid-sized startup focused on urban planning tools. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. At the office, introductions came with routine questions. Where are you from? What brought you here? Do you miss your family? I explained I was from Boston and needed a change. Most people nodded. A few probed further, but I had perfected the polite deflection. How do you explain that your mother abandoned you on your graduation day without sounding exaggerated? At night, I scrolled through my photos, deleting some deliberately. First, the easy ones. Blurry selfies, duplicates, random screenshots. Then the painful ones. My mother hugging Ryan at his birthday while I stood in the background, cheering at his games, smiling in front of his events. My award ceremony photos were often selfies in bathroom mirrors because no one else was there. I curated, not raged. I preserved evidence of my life, my projects, late-night coffee runs during finals, my new city. I erased her not to deny her existence, but to stop preserving a version of her that had never truly shown up. Sometimes I paused, asking if deletion was lying or finally stating the truth about what mattered. I kept one photo, my grandmother and me, arm in arm on her porch, the only person who had ever made me feel enough. That photo went into the corner of my mirror. San Francisco slowly became life. Keycards that opened doors, meetings where people listened, pizza nights with Emma and coworkers, mornings without checking my phone for my mother's acknowledgement. Still, a quiet awareness lingered. I had disappeared from her world, but part of me wanted her to notice my absence. Then, one Tuesday, an email arrived from a lawyer. Estate of Margaret Hayes. My grandmother had passed away 2 weeks earlier. The email included scanned documents, including a note she had left and a fund she had set up for my education. Her handwriting carefully named me, Catherine, but most of the money was gone, withdrawn for my brother's expenses, emergency bills, a failed venture, trips with friends. My vision blurred. My mother hadn't just skipped my graduation. She had rewritten the story so completely that even my grandmother believed I didn't want anyone there. She used the funds meant for me and threw my brother a party the same day I walked across the stage alone. When Emma returned that night, she found me surrounded by the printed documents. I slid them toward her. She told Grandma I didn't want anyone at graduation. She used the money for Ryan. Then she threw him a party the same day I walked alone across the stage. Emma read in silence, jaw tight. "What do you call that?" I asked. Neglect, manipulation, theft. How do you take your child's moment and hand it to someone else, then act like nothing happened? For the first time, my answer was clear. I want her to feel what she made me feel. I want her to realize she no longer knows who her daughter is because she rewrote my life. I want everyone she lied to see the truth. I'm done being the version of me she edits to suit herself. I booked a flight to Boston, not to reconnect, but to bury my grandmother and the version of myself my mother tried to control. On the day of the funeral, Boston felt smaller. At the cemetery, clutching the program, I reminded myself why I was there. Not for my mother, not anymore. The service was simple and quiet, as my grandmother would have wanted. I saw my mother across the crowd, hand gripping a chair, eyes red. Reflexively, I felt the urge to approach, to fix things. Then I remembered the empty seats at my graduation and the backyard party photo. After the burial, the family gathered at my grandmother's house. Conversations centered on my mother's strength. Between Ryan's setbacks and Catherine going wherever she went, Linda said Kathy didn't even want a ceremony. Can you imagine? My ears rang. I stepped into the doorway. "That's not what happened," I said. Heads turned. My mother froze, her smile slipping for the first time all day. "Kathy," she said, her voice tight. "This really isn't the time, is it?" I asked. Grandma spent years saving for my education and graduation. She trusted you to handle that money. She thought you were supporting me. She thought I didn't want anyone at my ceremony because you told her that." A murmur ran through the room. My aunt's eyes widened. My mother's face went pale. "You're misinterpreting," she said. I pulled the printed documents from my bag and laid them on the coffee table. "These are Grandma's instructions. And these," I said, flipping to the statements, "are the withdrawals you made on the same dates you posted photos of Ryan's trips and parties." I reached for the remote and turned on the TV, synced to my phone earlier in case I found the courage to do this. A slideshow appeared. Me in my gown on the empty stage, then backyard photos from the same afternoon, my mother laughing next to Ryan under a "Congrats Grad" banner. I didn't add music, the silence was enough. While walking across that stage alone, I said, "This is what my mother was doing, and she told Grandma I didn't want her there. She told all of you too, didn't she?" I let the question hang. My uncle cleared his throat. "Linda, is that true?" My mother opened her mouth, closed it, then forced a brittle laugh. "This is ridiculous. You know how dramatic Kathy can be. She left. She didn't even tell us she was going to San Francisco. What were we supposed to do?" "Show up," I said. "That's what parents do. And if you couldn't, you could have told the truth instead of turning me into the ungrateful daughter who didn't want to fuss. I disappeared because staying meant letting you keep rewriting my life, using my story as a prop for yours. I erased you from everything, papers, forms, photos, because you erased me first." For a long moment, no one spoke. Ryan shifted uncomfortably, avoiding my eyes. My aunt looked down at the documents again. Lips pressed thin. I could see it sinking in. The money, the lies, the gap between the mother my family thought they knew and the one who had quietly chosen a party over her daughter's graduation. My mother's voice cracked. "You don't understand what it's like to hold everything together. I did what I had to for this family." "Did you?" I asked. "Or did you just do what made you feel important? Here's what I'm doing for myself now." I pulled a slim folder from my bag and opened it. "These are the forms removing you as my emergency contact, my beneficiary, my point of contact for anything involving my life. I've already filed paperwork in San Francisco to change my last name to Grandma's maiden name. After today, legally and emotionally, we are done." A few people gasped. Someone dropped a plastic cup. "Is this revenge?" I asked quietly, more to the room than her. "Maybe, but it's also protection. I'm not going to keep bleeding for someone who calls my dreams just another day." My mother stared at me, expression crumpling. I could see the moment she realized I wasn't bluffing. There would be no late-night call where I apologized for overreacting, no quiet return with my tail tucked. I was already gone. This was just the part where I made her watch. Without another word, I turned off the TV, gathered my folder, and walked toward the door. The hallway seemed longer than I remembered, lined with framed photos of birthdays and holidays. I noticed how few of them included me. At the threshold, I stopped and looked back one last time. "Goodbye, Mom," I said. "I hope someday, when you wonder why your daughter doesn't call, you remember that you taught me how to disappear." Then I stepped outside, closing the door on the life I had finally decided to erase. Back in San Francisco, everything looked the same. The bus stop, the corner coffee shop, the dent in Emma's couch cushion. But I was different. The funeral, the confrontation, the slideshow all replayed in my mind like a movie I'd finally finished. For the first time, there wasn't a scene I wished I'd handled differently. I had said what needed to be said. I had shown what needed to be seen. Now it was about follow-through. The name change paperwork took months, but filing it felt like flipping a switch. I signed the forms with a steady hand. Catherine Hayes, my grandmother's last name. The first time I saw it printed officially, a mix of grief and pride washed over me. At the bank, I updated my records. "Any family members to add as beneficiaries?" the clerk asked. "No," I said. At the doctor's office, I filled out a new intake form. For emergency contact, I wrote Emma's name and a colleague who had become a friend. The line for mother stayed blank. I went through my phone, removing my mother's number from everything: rideshare apps, HR files, trusted contacts. I changed my email, filtered her messages to an archive folder, and muted notifications. Erasing her wasn't one dramatic gesture. It was a series of deliberate choices, form by form, memory by memory. One night, Emma found me on the floor surrounded by shoeboxes of old photos and notebooks. "You sure you're okay?" she asked, leaning on the doorframe. "I'm not burning anything," I said. "I'm just sorting." I made 2 piles. Pile 1, moments that still felt like mine, laughing with friends, school projects, the time Grandma and I baked a cake so badly it collapsed and we ate it from the pan. Pile 2, moments that only reminded me I had been an accessory in my own life, standing behind Ryan in family photos, sitting off to the side while my mother focused entirely on his latest crisis. I put the second pile back into the shoebox, taped it shut, and slid it to the back of my closet. Not destroyed, just out of reach. "Do you ever worry you'll regret this?" Emma asked quietly. Every day, I admitted, but I also regretted every time I had waited for her to change. At some point, you have to decide which regrets you can live with. Weeks turned into months. Life, real, ordinary, complicated life, started to fill the spaces that anger used to occupy. Work grew busier. I led my first project. I laughed more easily. Sometimes I even went a whole day without thinking about my mother at all. Then one afternoon, an email slipped past my filters. The subject line was just my name. I stared at it for a long time before opening it. It was from my mother. No greeting, no apologies, just a few lines. She said she'd heard about the name change. She said the family was concerned about me. She said she hoped I would come to my senses and remember where I belong. I read it twice, waiting for the old guilt to flare, for the urge to fix everything to pull me back in. It didn't. Instead, I thought about the empty row of seats on my graduation day, the photo of her laughing over a grill while I crossed the stage alone, my grandmother's careful handwriting, and the trust my mother had treated like an ATM. I hit reply and typed one sentence. I remember exactly where I belong, and it isn't where I'm treated like I don't exist. Then I deleted the draft instead of sending it. Some messages don't need to be delivered to be true. I archived her email, re-enabled the filter, and went back to work. People say revenge is about hurting someone the way they hurt you. Maybe that's true for some. For me, it was about making sure my mother had to live with the silence she created, without the comfort of pretending it was my choice all along. I didn't send dramatic ultimatums. I didn't show up on holidays to argue. I simply stopped being available for her version of the story. I changed my name, my contacts, my future. I erased every official trace of the daughter she hadn't bothered to show up for. In doing so, I finally saw myself clearly. Sometimes, late at night, I wonder what she tells people now. Does she say I'm busy? That we grew apart? That I'm going through a phase? Then I remember I don't have to know. Her narrative doesn't rule me anymore. I still carry the scars from the girl who stood on that stage searching for a face that never appeared. But I also have something she never gave me, a life where my worth isn't measured by how convenient I am to someone else. If you were in my place, if your mother abandoned you on the day you finally earned your moment, would you keep waiting in that auditorium for her to show up? Or would you walk out, close the doors behind you, and start erasing her from a story she never truly cared to be part of?